1. When I was younger, I had a best friend named Sophia. She was a young girl about my age. She wore a white dress with flip-flops, and we would play games and have play dates all the time. We played princess and cook and all sorts of fun things, and we were best friends. Our friendship soon turned odd when Sophia began acting strange. She appeared slightly different than normal, and she started to come in the middle of the night and wake me up asking to play. She began to tell me things when someone would get hurt, or a strange occurrence would happen. Eventually she would ask me to do things, and if I didn't, bad things would happen. And eventually she asked if it was okay, if she could be me. I didn't understand what she meant, so I just went to bed. Now at this point I shared a bunk bed with my sister, and I would wait for her to fall asleep on the top bunk, and me and Sophia would sneak off and play. If my parents heard us, she would hide in her place and I would pretend to sleep. One night she came to me, and I was really tired, so I told her I didn't want to play. And she got very angry with me and told me bad things could happen if I didn't. And while sitting on the edge of the bed, she touched me for the first time. And her shockingly cold touch sent chills through my whole body, terrifying me. I screamed out for my parents, waking my sister, and sending Sophia into the shadows just before my parents turned on the light. I told them what was going on, and they blamed my overactive imagination, claimed she was just imaginary and wasn't real. The next few weeks I closed the closet before bed, only to wake up to see her illuminated by a nightlight, standing with the closet open behind her and asking me to come play, and whispering scary thoughts into my head. And every night I refused to answer, calling to my parents to close the door when she opened it, and they accused me of opening the door for attention and began screaming at me to stop. My sister woke up a few times when the door opened and tried to defend me, but she only got in trouble for lying. For the next few days, my sister let me sleep on the top bunk with her till our mom yelled at us and made us sleep apart, only for the cycle to continue. My mom got sick of me asking to close the door every night, and observed the pattern of when it happened, and waited to catch me in the act. She burst in one night when she heard the door opening, to find I was tucked in bed. She watched as the door slowly creaked open and flicked on the light. She began to believe everything, apologizing for yelling and screaming at me, not believing, and forcing me to deal with it on my own. That's when she called in a psychic. The woman came in and read the room, asking me about my friend, and telling me she wasn't actually friendly, and that I needed to tell her to go away, and that she wasn't welcome here anymore. The next night I told her I wasn't her friend and I never wanted to see her again, and she left. I finally was able to sleep peacefully, until the night everything changed. I had been sleeping in my parents' room, and I woke up to the sound of the closet creeping open, and there she was. Sophia. She was staring at me from just inside the door, and slowly she crept forward till she was directly next to me. I was frozen in fear. She crept on top of me, holding me down, and I was stuck staring into her cold, lifeless eyes as fear encased me. Suddenly I could feel my mom moving next to me, and it pulled me out. A blood-curdling scream erupted from within me. My mother bolted up, and was silenced with fear as she saw a tall, pitch-black shadow looming over me. She held on to me and tried to wake up my father, pounding her fist into his chest and arms, unable to even let out a whisper. He finally woke up, shooting out of bed, threatening the demon which flew over the bed, and retreated out of the window into the night. My mom and dad both swear that this thing was trying to get to me and possess me, and honestly I believe it. The way it needed me to agree, and when I didn't, it got mad. It's honestly terrifying. We moved shortly after, and that specific entity is no longer around. 2. Here I am, 12 years after the events of Longford Drive, having nightmares again. And this time I need someone to believe me. I'm 28 now. No one believes 15 and 16-year-olds after all, overdramatic, attention-seeking. Leftover childhood over-imagination, mental illness. Have we taken her to a doctor? Yes. He said it's just the teenage hormones. Ah, that's it. This time I need someone to believe me. I was born in Fitzroy, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia in 1992. My brother was born in the same place in 1997. In 2001, before the towers in New York City fell, my family moved to the US. A few months later, the towers fell. No more house, so we moved to Texas. For almost 7 years, we could not buy a house. We had to rent. One night, in one of the rental homes, my brother woke me horrified. "There are red eyes in the corner of my room." "There is not. You're having a nightmare. Leave me alone." I don't remember him leaving, but the morning came and he was no longer in my room. I started to notice he would not travel to certain parts of the rental house, and I just ignored him. For years. He never mentioned the red eyes in the corner of his room again. We moved around a lot after that, and finally we were able to buy our own home, Longford Drive. It was an older home for the area, early 1980s. The surrounding homes were 2000s range and actually had vinyl flooring instead of old, scratched-up flooring that was light, ugly brown that looked like something out of the 1970s. I used to study every scratch and scrap on the floor and would wonder, what happened there? Movers, children, dogs, or something else? Regardless of the home's obvious bland and aged interior, it was at least our home. It was an early cookie-cutter house, though, you could tell. Every main room was on the first floor, and the second floor was a dominated media room, with slanted ceilings for the roof, and a huge walk-in attic. The attic was practically its own room, which I suppose my parents liked at the time, due to their endless 80s furniture from Australia that for some reason they refused to part with. The most disgusting of all this furniture was a couch with fishes on it. An avian yellow couch with very detailed fish on it that were a variety of colors. I don't recall when they finally got rid of it, but I'm glad they did. I'm glad they got rid of a lot of things when we left that house. It took a few years, about 5 to be exact, to truly realize something wasn't right. And it all started the night before sophomore year of high school. My best friend Chelsea and I had practically grown up in that town. We had heard all the legends, laughed about them with our friends and boyfriends. But I guess that night we got brave. So we went to the local graveyard that was at least 200 years old, and decided to wander around it and take pictures on an old digital camera. New camera at that point in time. My friend Chelsea had claimed in the past that she could see spirits. To this day, I'm still not sure if I believe in that shit. Even after what happened. Logic is a bitch. I'm laughing about something, stumbling through the graveyard like a disrespectful shit teenager. We've all been there, right? Remember when you knew about death but still didn't process that it could happen to you? Sometimes I'm still like that. Tell me, does it disappear with age? Chelsea stops laughing. I look back at her because the silence stuns me. She is white. She is a white Jewish girl, but she was unnaturally white at this moment. Her brown eyes look black and they were big. We need to leave. What? She speaks angry. We need to leave, now. I feel something almost consume me. Just absolute dread and fear, beyond fear, all in me. There is no fight or flight. It is like it's broken. We just stare at each other like we're going to let whatever is about to happen, happen. Like we won't go home tonight and we accept it. Chelsea breaks. I watch her throwing up her feet as her figure gets further from me and more towards my little red Mustang on the horizon. I don't know how. I don't remember, to be honest. But I ended up following her somehow and suddenly was grabbing the door handle of my Mustang. Then I was inside. The feeling had at least faded. What did you see? Nothing. But it felt. Let's go. I don't want to talk about it. Where's the camera? I handed her the camera and she flipped through the pictures I had taken. They were unusually blurry, and as she scrolled, I saw more and more bubble-looking things. Dust, that's what I immediately thought. I knew nothing back then, I suppose. She stared intensely at some specific ones. Then a look of rage came onto her face. She began deleting every picture furiously, and in that moment I thought only one thing. Drama queen? I dropped Chelsea at home. She said very little. I told her I would see her tomorrow at school. She turned and said, "Make sure you remove the SD card from the camera before you get home. Make sure all the photos are deleted." I ignored her and rolled my eyes after she had shut the door and turned away. I went home, laid out my first day of school clothes, and slept better than I had slept in a long time. I think I slept better back then, honestly. Now I'm a serious insomniac with overactive REM cycles. My brother's room was right next to mine at Longford. We slept with our doors open. I'm not sure why. I think it was a childhood habit that I never would participate in today. I don't think he does either. I woke at 6:15 that morning to his panicked face wailing over me. To this day, I have never in my life seen him so frightened. He was screaming, and my memory tells me crying, wailing. "Someone come into your room?" "What? Someone's in your room! Get up!" He dragged me out of bed and ran to the door, still clinging to me. I was more awake now and threw on the light. I saw nothing except my tacky lilac room. He ran to the closet and flung the door open. Nothing but my gross mid-2000s clothes. He ran to the bathroom, threw the door open, threw the shower curtain back. Nothing. I looked at him, eyebrows raised and almost laughing at him. His face turned paler. I woke up, and there was a light in the hallway, and I saw a man. He was older, had a long beard, overalls, and he was floating. He walked into your room. I saw it. It was not a dream. Do not look at me like that. I saw him. He began to tear up from frustration. My parents had noticed the sound at this point and came in. He told them what happened. The first exchange between these adults. "He's on ADD medication. He's been having nightmares in this one. We should probably switch him." Yes. "But what if you saw Jesus?" My mother had noticed his face before stating this. It was a face of disbelief, frustration, anger, and horror. "I'm sorry, brother. I didn't believe you either." My mind had already begun to favor the adult side of things. Too scared to admit there is sometimes things we don't understand. Too arrogant and egotistical. "I'm sorry." He moved out of that room soon after. He moved into the guest bedroom, and the guest bedroom furniture moved into his old room. I was now alone in that side of the house, which I enjoyed for a time. I rearranged my bedroom furniture as I wanted to participate in a change as well. One night, not long after, I woke from the sound of footsteps in the hall. It was a small hall that only led to the now guest bedroom in my room. I figured it was my dad checking on me. My older brother had passed away when I was a baby, and my father never truly recovered. He would often come to check on us while we slept. He always just wanted to make sure we were still breathing, I guess. We were 3 or 4 children left. My older sister was married and lived far away, so we were always the babies that were left. Step, step, step. It was familiar, so I rolled over and got more comfortable, preparing to fall back asleep. Step, step, step. I finally opened my eyes and checked at my door to look into the hallway. Nothing. Only a dim nightlight was staring back at me. Okay, he's walking around the kitchen for his late-night glass of milk. I leaned to the right to peer past the hallway. The kitchen light was off. Step, step, step. I was half awake and confused. I closed my eyes and listened hard. Where the fuck is that coming from? My eyes burst open as I realized. I slowly followed my lilac wall to my ceiling, which was unpainted. I froze and stared in disbelief. It was coming from the attic. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I felt something was so wrong, and I had to stay awake in case it decided it wanted to consume me. Something was there with me. A week later, my parents complained about squirrels in the attic, and I suddenly was sleeping very well again. Then I heard it again, even after the exterminator said the holes were patched and the squirrels were gone. Step, step, step. No sleep. The next day I went to the attic to figure this shit out for myself. I opened the attic door and walked up the stairs. I studied where my room would be under this attic, and I found it. I walked over as far as I could and suddenly saw nothing but insulation was covering the entirety of where my room would be. That night was the first time I ever slept with my door closed, and it has not changed since. Step, 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 step. Sometimes the footsteps sounded rushed, sometimes angry, sometimes sad. But they wouldn't come every night. Chelsea stopped sleeping over. I complained to my parents about these squirrel noises every now and then, but the exterminator never found anything. No traces of anything, rats, bugs, squirrels, nothing. My parents didn't believe me, and my brother would almost ignore me when I mentioned it. He didn't want to hear it. Months went by, and I was finally able to convince Chelsea to come over for a minute and watch some TV. As she entered the house, we were gossiping about someone from school. We laughed in the hallway, and then it happened again. She stopped, and this time she fixed her eyes on the stairs leading to the media room. The stairs were zigzag stairs, so the stairs would go up. Then it would be a flat landing. Then the stairs would go the opposite direction, and then there would be the media room. On the wall after the first set of stairs was a painting my mother had painted of a thunderstorm. Chelsea parted her lips and said in a whisper, "There is someone standing at the top of your stairs. I can see them in the painting's reflection." She left. I told my father that I suspected someone was up in the media room. He searched everywhere up there, nothing. I told him that Chelsea must have seen some shadows then. Another few months went by, and I stopped going up to the media room. I used to secretly watch Family Guy up there when my parents were gone at work, but something was just wrong. It felt wrong being up there. Halloween came around, and my brother and I were instructed to pull everything out of the attic. My brother ditched me halfway through, and I was pissed. I angrily started grabbing the boxes and was verbally venting to myself about his lazy nature. I started down the steps of the attic, and slowly started to lose my grip on one of the boxes. I paused to adjust, still livid, then... A shot of air was blown from behind my head, right next to my ear. I watched as a few strands of hairs reacted to the shot of air and flew out in front of my face on my left side, like someone had intentionally snuck up behind me and blew air at the back of my ear in an attempt to scare me. Except I was the only person here. I was venting about it after all. I knew where my brother was. He was downstairs playing Call of Duty with his stupid friends. Dad was in his room watching Judge Judy, his favorite, and Mum was on a 3-day trip. She was a flight attendant. She was in Seattle, 6 states away. I watched my hair fall back to the side of my face. I dropped the boxes and let out a scream I don't think I have yet to top. 12 years later, and I have never screamed like that again. I jumped and leaped down the remainder of the stairs and fell out of the attic door into the media room. My brother was already halfway up the stairs, thinking something horrible had happened. I trembled out what happened. Someone blew in my ear. My hair, I saw it. It flew past my head. A smile cracked on his face, and he started laughing at me. Payback for when I laughed at him the first time. Except this time he was the one in denial and disbelief. He was like me. He didn't want to believe it. Life was already too scary and overwhelming. Why believe that? My dad followed, and I immediately started lying to his horrified face. I tripped. "Oh, are you okay?" "Yes." "Okay, finish getting the Halloween stuff out." "Yes, sir." I turned to my brother and threatened to hurt him if he didn't finish helping me. He didn't. I waited for my mother to get home and explained I wanted to do it with her, and I would help her set up the Halloween stuff. She was delighted. The next few years I developed a habit of sleep aids. Nothing major, just over-the-counter stuff. To this day, I take about 3 sleep aid pills a night. My husband doesn't understand how my body has built up that kind of tolerance, and he doesn't believe it either. If only he knew. The footsteps never stopped. Till the day we moved out, they never stopped. I finally started doing research into the house. Turns out it was owned by an older couple before us, and the husband hung himself in the attic above my room. Financial problems, apparently. I told my parents. They didn't believe me. I never told my brother. I figured he wouldn't want to know. I still wonder if his nightmares ever stopped. Mine didn't. But they have just gotten more complex with age. Taxes, career, break-ins, car wrecks, plane crashes, ghosts of the past. Name it. We moved about a year later. I came home from university one day, in our new home, my mother's dream home. She asked me to go back to Longford Drive. Our old mail was apparently over there. I drove up to the house. A shiver went down my spine. It started at my left ear. I had lived in a normal home for a few months now and hadn't realized how wrong Longford had felt. Something was really wrong with it. Did I let it in? With the pictures that night at the cemetery? Had it always been there, and I just hadn't noticed until my brother had his episode that morning? I don't know. I don't want to know still. Sometimes things are so frightening or traumatizing that you feel like you don't need to know. You don't want to face it. The world is scary enough. I walked to the front door of Longford Drive, one last time, and rang the doorbell. An older woman answered the door. I smiled and told her I was here for the mail. She jumped and went, "Oh yes, here." She handed me a bundle of letters, magazines, and what I assumed was mostly junk mail. As an adult now, I can confirm this is what it mostly was. I told her thank you and started to turn away. She stopped me. "Did you used to live in this house?" "Yes, ma'am, for many years." "Can I ask you a question?" "Yes." "Did you ever have problems with critters getting into the attic? We had someone come and check, but they said there was no sign of anything up there. It almost sounds like footsteps at night. My granddaughter comes to stay and keeps complaining that it sounds like footsteps in the attic. Any of this sound familiar?" No. She wouldn't have believed me anyway, but this time, I need someone to believe me. 3. Now, whether you actually believe in the paranormal or just enjoy listening to the spooky stories in an attempt to scare yourself, this is one of the many paranormal experiences I've had. Arguably the most terrifying, converting one of the eyewitnesses from a skeptic to completely believing in the paranormal and actually taking it seriously. My friends and I have always been quite fond of going out urbex exploring. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's when you go out and look for abandoned and derelict buildings to explore and photograph. We didn't go out searching for the haunted side of things. We just enjoyed the eeriness and also the beauty of old abandoned places. Living in Scotland, a lot of these abandoned places are normally surrounded by amazing scenery, from hills and mountains to thick forests and lush fields, so we always made a day out of it when we did go exploring. One house in particular was our favorite, so much so that we had already visited a couple of times prior to this experience. Myself and my friends, Clegane and Brienne. Myself and 2 of my best friends, Clegane and Brienne, decided to go back, but the condition of the place had declined quite rapidly since the last time we had been, and everything seemed very unstable, but we didn't let that stop us. Finding that our usual entry spot had been boarded up, we felt quite defeated but decided to look for another entryway. After searching around for a while, we noticed that the roof in one of the lower parts of the house had been damaged by fire and was practically all gone. It wasn't the easiest to get up to, using a tree and each other to do so, but we finally got in. It was going relatively normal. We were wandering around the inside of the house, searching and admiring the rooms we could still get into, being terrified by the occasional bird being spooked by our footsteps, and taking photos of the amazing architecture. However, something was different this time. The whole place felt off, and a little more eerie than it normally did. I've always been what you would describe as spiritually inclined, so I felt this more than my friends did. One of them was a complete skeptic, so he just brushed it off and said we were over-exaggerating and making things up. His mind was going to be completely changed after leaving this house. After exploring the top 3 floors as much as we could, cringing at the spray paint art the vandals had left, we were on the ground floor just having a chat and discussing how much the house's condition had really declined. We were standing in one of the hallways, almost in a triangle formation. I was standing in a door frame with my back towards the empty room, with Clegane to my left and Brienne to my right. I was still feeling a little uneasy, but I didn't give much thought to it. As we were all conversing about plans for the rest of the day, I felt something on my back. It felt like someone had run their hand down my back. From the base of my neck to the center of my back, I felt a firm, consistent pressure, until the pressure tapered off down to the base of my back. It was over within seconds. I felt all the color drain from my face as I frantically jumped forward with a scream. Brienne and Clegane both looked at me in confusion and asked what happened and if I had hurt myself. In a haze of confusion and dizziness, I wasn't able to form any words, never mind describing what I had just felt. I regained my bearings and took a couple of deep breaths before trying my best to explain the sensation of being touched. Brienne's face turned a little pale as she saw how serious I was being. However, Clegane was a skeptic. He laughed and thought I was joking, or that I had accidentally hit something without realizing or a bug had hit me. I knew that wasn't the case, because for a split second before it happened, I felt every single hair in my body stand up, as a warning to what was about to happen. Being slightly freaked out, Brienne and myself managed to convince Clegane that it was time to leave. On top of what had just happened, it was also getting a little cold. While making our way to the same section we had entered through, I started to feel a burning sensation run down my back, like someone had taken hot coals or a flame down my back. Starting to freak out again, I asked Brienne to check if anything was there. Asking her what was wrong, I automatically knew something was wrong because she didn't give me a response. She was just silent. Next thing I knew, Brienne was calling over Clegane to come and look, which made my anxiety spike up more. From the look on Clegane's face, I became increasingly worried. They both nervously told me that there were marks going down my back. Obviously not being able to see my back myself, I asked them to take a photo for me to see. Looking at the photo, there were 3 distinctive scratches going down my back, exactly where I had felt someone or something touch me. Looking at that photo still gives me uneasy feelings to this day. At first, Clegane was convinced I had done it myself or caught myself on something, but after examining the scratches more, he determined that it couldn't have been. The scratches went under my bra strap, which would have been impossible for me to do without them noticing. At this point, we were all trying to keep our calm while internally freaking out. We tried to make our way out as quick as we could without injuring ourselves. Climbing back over the wall of the house and through the hole where the roof used to be, we collectively walked a few feet away from the house and stopped to look back at it. Still trying to understand what had just happened, we all agreed that we'd go back to the car and never come back here. The walk back to the car, which took around 20 minutes, was relatively uneventful, apart from a continuous uneasy feeling that we were being watched or followed, and occasionally thinking we could hear footsteps behind us. It was actually quite peaceful, taking in the Scottish countryside. We got to the car, where we sat and had a smoke, still trying to completely calm ourselves down. It's safe to say that after that day, Clegane took a long time to process the events, but undoubtedly became a believer. We swore to never come back to this house, but for some reason, we're always drawn back to it. It's like an urge to come back and visit, like an itch that you can't quite scratch. Maybe we're just drawn in by the eeriness or the mystery around that day, or maybe it's something more than that. 4. So this post is a bit paranormal, but also heartwarming, I guess. My great-grandpa, Leo, passed away in November 2017, and my grandma, Robin, December 2016. This explanation is going to be a bit long, so stay with me. Leo is from a place called Red Lodge, Montana, and that was where we buried his ashes. Red Lodge is known for paranormal shit happening almost every day, probably because of the mines that got burned down decades ago. This mine that got burnt down was where Leo's brother worked. He was in it when it got destroyed and he died. My grandpa never opened up about it. It was a pretty huge loss. Anyways, back to present day. Let's say 2019. My family and I go to Red Lodge every summer so we could visit Grandma and Grandpa's graves. This time it was a bit different. My great aunt and I decide to go down the mines, which you're not supposed to go to since you could be arrested. When we were down there, we heard footsteps from the old mines, and I even saw a black figure. I had the vibe it was looking at me, so I decided to look back at it, and it was gone. The vibe I got wasn't exactly fear. I wasn't afraid, but rather comfortable with the situation. When we got back up from the mines, my mom and uncle looked at us with these huge eyes. "You guys didn't hear that?" my mom asks. I shook my head, confused as fuck. "Hear what?" my aunt asks. My uncle explains that there was a literal helicopter above us the whole time, and they said it was loud as hell. So apparently, while we were down there, we couldn't hear or sense anything around us except the figures and footsteps. That day was only one occasion of this happening. So for Robin, I wasn't that close with her much. I was only 8 when she died, but I still felt upset when she passed. When I feel like she visited me, I was home alone. I was playing guitar when I thought I heard her telling me to come here. I looked up, terrified. I got up from my bed and tried to find out where the voice was coming from. We lived in a strange apartment. The hallway was too long. I walked down the hallway and my door makes a creaking sound. It normally made that noise when someone was opening and closing it. I got even more scared because, like, WTF, I'm home alone, but somebody's talking to me? Messing with me? So many thoughts went through my mind. I got so scared that I fell to the ground. It felt like when you have a hot flash. You can't see that well. Everything is foggy and just turns to weird colors. I guess I walked back to my bed because I woke up and saw that it was 5:30 p.m. It was around noon when this happened. But I don't think my grandparents meant to scare me. Like, I had a dream just recently about Grandpa Leo that he was taking me somewhere to buy some stuff. He was very loving and so polite, just like he was when he was alive. Five. Let me set the scene. I used to own a house near the mountains in the northern side of Colorado. This was a period of time where I had just gotten fired from my job because of COVID-related reasons and was home alone. I lived with my roommate at the time, but he went out to some club that night, leaving me alone with my dog. I hate to even think of this, and this is the first time I've ever told anyone besides my neighbors. It was around 8 p.m. on a Friday, and I was watching Friends on the TV. While watching, I heard what sounded like little boxes shuffling around in the basement. My dog immediately noticed this and brought his head up. Our basement wasn't finished, and we had a window down there which wasn't in good shape, so I just brushed it off thinking that the wind was making noises. After a while, the noise never stopped. I decided to grab my light and head down there with my dog. Grabbed my light from the kitchen and opened the door to the basement. Started walking down the stairs calling my dog. The only thing odd was that my dog decided to not come down and was making that, like, high-pitched noises dogs make when they are happy or whatever. He refused to go down into the basement and just stood at the top of the basement. To give you perspective on how my basement was laid out, all my extra stuff from my childhood, like clothes and such, were on the back right corner. So when you walk down the stairs, on the very right, that is where that stuff is. And all my roommate's stuff is right next to mine on the left, and there was a bench with all of the previous owner's stuff that they left there. So while going down there, the sound was still very clear and was getting louder and louder the farther I got in there. I saw the window open and making noises and decided to go close it. As soon as I closed it, it felt like a hand grabbed my leg. But it wasn't a normal hand, it was super hot. My legs were swooped back and I fell down. All I can remember from this point on was my dog barking extremely loud. I then woke up and found myself in the closet of my roommate's bedroom. I walked down the stairs and looked at the time, and it was 3, and my roommate wasn't back yet. I literally looked at the clock and grabbed my phone, dog, and ran outside the front door. I went over to the neighbors around a mile. I ran there bare feet. I didn't have a car at the time, by the way. When I got to the neighbors that I barely knew, I rang the doorbell extremely fast, and around a minute later a man opened the door and asked why I was ringing his door this late at night, and I could tell was quite frustrated with me. I told him everything, and he said that the previous owners moved out because the husband of the house ended up hanging himself in the basement. We talked for a bit while I let my dog run around in the back. I called my roommate to not go home and come over to the neighbors. Around an hour, he showed up, and we all just sat there and talked about what had happened. Around 10 in the morning, I headed back to my house with my roommate to find the sofa flipped, all doors open, and the cabinets in the kitchen all open with dishes on the floor broken. I decided to go live with my sister and sell the house around 2 months later. To this day, I'm not sure what that was and haven't had any other experiences. By the way, something I didn't tell was that I had just broken up with my girlfriend. I've heard that ghosts thrive off bad energy or whatever. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, or how to explain it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 225. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And if you liked the video, then please do like, comment, and or subscribe if you haven't already done so. That is a massive help to me, as the more interaction, the better. It helps encourage YouTube to recommend the video to others. Right, where are we? Oh, yeah, this is Friday, so there'll be a new episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier. Excellent. That's, wasn't expecting much from that show, but I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I think Loki starts at some point, so next month, maybe. It's not too far away. I hope you all have wonderful plans for the weekend, at least as wonderful as they can be in these times, and certainly hope you're being safe with whatever you're doing. There's a film I want to see, a Nicolas Cage film. What was that called again? I saw a review of it. Let's see. Nicolas Cage. I don't care about his personal life, I just want to know what his filmography is. There we go. Willy's Wonderland, that's it. Don't know where I'm going to find it though. But the review sounded interesting. The trailer I watched looked pretty fun. Essentially, he's a guy who rolls into this town, and he's asked to spend the night essentially doing maintenance and performing tasks and fixing things up in this theme park, which is called Willy's Wonderland. Similar to Five Nights at Freddy's, I understand, where the attractions come alive and try to kill everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to be trying to track that down. If I can release... Let's see, the release was limited theatrical. Not really an option. I'll see if I can get it somewhere. It's video on demand, so I'll see if I can get it somewhere. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.